Welcome with us here now. We have Grant Smith, the CEO of Pond Technologies. Grant, thanks for joining us. How are you?
Good morning, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure, Grant. Let's start by just giving us a high level overview for those in our audience who might not be familiar with Pond. What does the company do exactly?
Sure. Well, again, thanks for having me. It's a great story, Pond Technologies. We are a clean tech, and we've sort of merged into an ag tech. We take CO2, carbon dioxide, we funnel it into containers, and we grow algae. The CO2 can be taken from heavy emitters. So think of natural gas power plants, oil and gas, could be a brewery, a distillery, could be a large food company, any company that has a continuous source of CO2 and a company that has a CO2 problem. As you know, it'll be more and more costly to pay to pollute, and that'll only go higher. So our technology captures that CO2, we funnel it into tanks with light, water, and algae. And once we start disparaging, think of an aquarium, you have CO2 bubbling in the bottom of the container, and that container starts to grow algae. And once the algae grows very, very quickly, we're abating a lot of CO2 at a 2-to-1 ratio. So 2 tons of CO2 are used to grow 1 ton of algae.
Fantastic. Okay, really interesting. And obviously, even more interesting than what the company does is the origin story behind it. Can you tell us more about how everything got started?
Certainly. Yeah, so the founder who's still with us, he's in the lab developing and continuing to advance the technology. He was reading an article many years ago about carbon dioxide being used to grow algae. So that was really the beginnings. The company was called Pond Biofuels. And back in the day when oil was approaching $200 a barrel, that was something that a lot of people were looking into. Algae's changed over the years, so we changed the company name about 5 years ago to Pond Technologies. And it's a more suited name because algae has now a greater, I would call it, application use globally. So you have animal feed, you have as well as fish feed, you have bioplastics, you have biopharmaceuticals, specialized proteins in algae. So the need for clean, green, sustainable protein. And what I mean by that is you're looking at Impossible Burger, Impossible Foods, Beyond Meat, all these types of, major CPG companies today that are looking for a reliable, clean source of vegan protein. That is algae. So really that's where the company really is headed in that direction.
Outstanding. Okay, pivoting a bit to some specifics. Pond is seeking to combat climate change while providing a solution for existing industries to move towards a more low carbon model. Talk a little bit about how Pond is equipped in a unique fashion, a lot of people say, to fulfill those missions.
Certainly. Well, essentially, we're monetizing a waste stream. So, as I mentioned prior, you have carbon dioxide, you're going to pay to pollute. We're looking at a smokestack. It could be a natural gas power plant. We put a hole in the stack and we have a pipe that transfers that CO2 into a room that's filled with these photobioreactors, and we start growing that algae. That algae can reduce arable land farming at a significant level. We had a press release this morning where we're working with our partner AB Agri and another major agri-food business company. And what we're working on is growing algae to reduce methane in cattle. So if you were to take 1 to 2 to 3% of the cattle's diet that now becomes algae that's grown off CO2, you've reduced methane output in cattle significantly. The additional benefit is that when you have an animal that's digesting food more properly in terms of, absorption and getting proper nutrients, that cattle will grow faster and require less food. So let's call that maybe 10%. So by putting algae from a CO2 emitter into a cattle's diet, you've reduced methane, but you've also reduced the amount of food that animal needs. Therefore, we could, approximately say we've reduced 10% of arable land farming, and all that is done through adding algae from a carbon abatement win-win platform into the animal's diet. Chickens, fish, many other animals are also growing fuller and faster. So there's a number of areas that we're working on where I would call that sort of a win-win program here at Pond.
Perfect. And then digging in a little bit further, Pond has a vertically integrated model. It nets a sustainable, saleable asset as the end result, but it doubles down on sustainability. How do you see the carbon capture space around this vertically integrated B2B clean tech model developing over the next several years? What is the roadmap ahead here?
Well, certainly. I think, as we mentioned this morning in our most recent press release, our partner AB Agri first believed in algae. They did all their homework. So they tested algae into animals' diets and found that these animals are growing fuller and faster. So we think that once the world sort of sees this first plant built and they see that the algae can be grown off CO2, our phone's already ringing, but we anticipate it, Michael, to grow and ring significantly more as companies look and say, wow, I've got CO2, but I can grow algae that could go into the food chain. And it's an ROI, it's a return on their investment while they're reducing their carbon. So we really feel that the model will be a nice self-fulfilling prophecy role in the fact that when people see it, it's sort of if you build it, they will come, that type of model. And that's where we are at Pond right now. We're moving to that commercialization stage out of the R&D stage that we've done for the past several years.
Awesome. Okay, and as you've mentioned a couple of times, Pond recently announced some exciting news about the latest partnership with Biocarbon in collaboration with AB Agri and Lavalta. Talk a little bit more about the partnership and how that too is going to work to fulfill the company's purpose. How are the biggest steps of growth going to come into play with this partnership?
Certainly. So the group, the Biocarbon Group, is a key partner to Pond. They're EPC. They help build and construct these facilities. AB Agri is the animal feed sort of formulator. So they come up with the recipes and the formulations, and they have the sales and distribution arm globally. So the partnership with the unnamed food company, the major agribusiness company, they wish to remain unnamed at this time, but we hope to get that name out in the future. And it's a significant player that is really looking to algae to, reduce arable land farming so they can use algae as part of that sort of superfeed ingredient into their supply chain. And we're finding that there are benefits, one of which is methanogenesis, which is the reduction of methane in cattle by adding algae into their feed. It's a large study. It'll take a few months, but we've had early indications that it's very promising, hence the need for this larger study. And we feel that that'll lead to, many other great discoveries with algae being put into the feed chain and the food chain.
Awesome. Okay, let's talk a little bit about anything else that might be coming up on the horizon. Anything on the roadmap for Pond specifically that our audience at Benzinga should keep an eye out for?
As I mentioned prior, we have a very full pipeline. Our phone is ringing. We have a number of customers that are reaching out to us that are now understanding the benefits of algae. And I think that's what took some time, Michael, was algae sort of had to catch up. We had the technology, we knew we could grow it, and we need to find off-takers. So we have a number of projects that we're working on here in the lab where we're growing unique strains of algae, some that contain natural colors, some that contain proteins, some that contain oils. And those oils and proteins all have a need now in this new economy where, one, it can be a circular economy on that CO2 platform, but two, it can be a sustainable protein that, again, is used in major CPGs. It can be an oil that can be used for heart health and pharmaceuticals without taking fish out of the ocean. So we have a very disruptive platform. We can grow these proteins at a fraction of a cost. And again, we're growing that off of a free food source called carbon dioxide.
Awesome. It's been an amazing amount of information we've consumed just in the last couple of minutes. Lastly, as we close out here, where can the audience follow or get in touch with you guys over at Pond if they're interested in learning more and following your journey?
Well, pondtech.com at our website, we have a lot of detailed information, all of our news, everything. There's a video that shows how the technology works on there. It's only 1 or 2 minutes. It's an excellent snapshot. Myself, my team, we're always available for calls. And we enjoy speaking with investors. So, all the information is on our website. Feel free to reach out. We'll look forward to connecting.
Amazing. Grant Smith, CEO of Pond Technologies. Thank you so much for being here with us today, talking about some of the exciting news you've had recently and some other things coming up.
Thank you.